Welcome to the Notes to My Legal Self AI Insights, where law and AI collide. Get ready to level up your legal game with us. We've got career advice, cutting edge developments, mind blowing legal tech, and more. Know someone making waves in the legal AI world? Nominate them, or even nominate yourself. We love courageous souls. And don't forget, we want to hear from you too. Ask questions, drop comments. Let's build a community of legal superheroes. But here's the deal. We're all about to have a blast. AI may be serious, but we're here to make it fun. So buckle up, get ready to power up, and let's embark on this exciting journey together. Now, let's introduce your fearless host, Olga Mack. Get ready to dive into the awesomeness of Notes to My Legal Self AI Insights. Let's go.
Well, hello everyone. It's good to see you all. We are on this book roadshow. You might have seen me with this book. We, we meaning three editors and almost 50 leaders in legal tech wrote this book and shared insight around legal operations and AI and data. And I'm on the mission to talk to every single one of the authors and share their insights with you. And today I have repeat guests. She's been on my show before, and we're gonna build on the conversation we had before. And she's back. Laura, welcome to Notes to My Legal Self. For people who have not met you, please introduce yourself.
Well, thank you for having me again. I am a California licensed attorney living in Copenhagen, Denmark. I work for startups and scale ups. Currently, I'm a senior legal director at Worksome. And on the side, I teach legal teams, both law firms and in house professionals, how to use AI and how to optimize their performance.
So, last time we talked about asynchronous communication on the legal team, and that's kind of the subject of what you've written in this book. So, tell us more about your fascinating chapter.
Yeah, well, I guess I'll start with why I got in or how I got into asynchronous communication first. And to let everyone know who doesn't know what asynchronous communication is, it is communicating without the expectation of a response. So right now, you and I are having asynchronous communication where we're communicating in real time. Asynchronous communication is text messages, email, Slacks, right? You send a message and you don't expect an immediate response. I was the first legal counsel at Unity to be in Europe while the rest of my legal team was 9 hours behind me in California. And so there I really had to change how I worked because I wouldn't be able to talk to my colleagues until the end of my day. And if I needed to get information from them, I had to do it in a different way. I couldn't just walk up to someone's desk or even, wait a couple hours for them to respond. So that's really how I got into asynchronous communication. And when I started to learn more about it, it fundamentally changed the way that I work. And so I believe it is actually a great way for legal teams to optimize their performance because it's about building knowledge and communicating very, very clearly and transparently and setting up processes. And this really lays a great foundation for your legal team.
I love that. And we had a very deep dive on this. I will put a link to our previous conversation. We talked quite a lot about it. You shared best tips. And we have a few folks saying hello. Hello, Ashley. Thank you for saying hello. Thank you for visiting and asking
Yeah.
questions and making comments. I encourage people to do that. And you shared a lot of best practices about asynchronous communication. Let me ask you this question, just a point of clarification. You do expect a response. You may not expect it right away, or you don't expect response, because I think I heard two things, and I have to be very clear that I do expect responses no
Yes,
matter what medium I communicate. In
that's
fact, I will take
probably
it personally if you don't. So I don't necessarily expect them right away, and in some mediums, I will give you a longer leeway. But to be clear, and everyone on my team knows that if you don't respond to me, you and I will at some point, if you consistently do that, stop talking.
no, sorry. It's the expectation of communicating without an immediate response. So right now, if you ask me a question and I didn't respond, that would definitely be awkward. The same thing with asynchronous communication is that it's some sort of recorded communication. So that could be written That could be doing a video, that could be a presentation, whatever way you want to record some information, you record that information, transmit it to another person, and you expect that they will get to that when they have time. So, the perfect example is someone maybe in Singapore, someone in Europe, and then someone in the Pacific time zone in the United States. To get all of them on a call at the same time is going to be probably actually most painful for someone like me who's sitting in Europe. It's much easier to try to communicate your messages by writing to them or recording a video, or trying to communicate with them in another way, so then they receive your message, they have time to digest it when they have time, and then they respond to you. So yes, you need to respond to the message, or else I think the whole communication part of this would fail.
The communication part of it would indeed fail, and so would trust, and so relationship, and so continuous productive output will also cease. So do not stop communicating. I love that. So back to this book.
Yes.
You shared quite a lot in this book. At a high level, what did you share?
First, I shared about best practices for asynchronous communication. So, how can you implement that? Right? How do you need to sort of set expectations with your team, set up guidelines about when do you use real time communication, because you do need to have meetings for some things. And then, what are things that you don't need to have meetings for, and how can you handle those? And that requires having to document a lot of your processes and build knowledge banks, because people will be relying either on written knowledge or video knowledge to gain a lot of information. And that lays an excellent foundation for the application of technology, particularly AI. So with AI, you're going to need to provide additional information and context and know where in the process you're using AI. So if you're using,
Well, let me stop you
yeah,
for a second. You mentioned something, the term that I don't usually use. I want to make sure. I think I understand it, but I want to make sure I do. You mentioned this term knowledge bank in communications, specifically, actually, in the context of human communication. We'll get to AI. I most definitely want to get to AI communication too. But in the context of human communication, when you talked about knowledge bank, what does it mean, and how do you create it, and how, and then what do you do with it?
be knowledge management. So for people who worked at law firms, you have people, librarians, knowledge managers, people who are actually creating and organizing and maintaining the company's knowledge and intellectual property and work product. That's very important in a law firm. And in-house, you have the same information. However, it's not documented, and usually it's not maintained in the same way. And that's especially true if you're in a fast-moving technology company. A lot of things aren't written down. They're sort of just passed around orally. And that allows for lots of room for error, for not everyone getting the same information. So it's really great to create lots of documentation just about, even if we just look at onboarding, take onboarding, for example, right? Let's make sure everyone has the same onboarding process and gets the same information. Something that is simple as that, making sure you're documenting it and providing your new employees everything that you need. That's part of your company's, knowledge bank, whatever you want to call it. I call it a knowledge bank, knowledge repository, company information, right? You have to have that structured and clear, and the more time and effort you put into it, the greater your return will be, especially for your employees, but then also for adopting new technologies.
And it sounds like it's a sort of a multimedia experience. There's some writing, there's some videos, there's some audio, there's some pictures. It's a full show on some level.
Yeah, and it's in different software, right? Depending, maybe you have a custom solution, maybe you have everything in Notion, maybe you're using Google Documents. I have not used a Microsoft product except for Microsoft Word for a very long time, but I think they use like SharePoint, maybe if you're sharing documents there. So it's storing your documents, but then also how are people reading them, viewing them, accessing them, all of that is really your knowledge and information that you need to do your job, and other people, information that you need to share about your job with other people so then they can do their job.
We have another hello. Hello, Mariette, for saying hello. Thank you so much. We have folks in the room who are actively listening to this conversation. Okay, let's talk about the meat of this conversation, because I definitely want to get to this place of why asynchronous communication that you initially implemented in human communication with an expectation of response at some point,
Yes.
how is that useful for AI stuff?
Yeah. So what you're doing when you're building an asynchronous communication culture, right? It's a different way of working. Most of us are used to working with getting an immediate response, sort of calling someone up or tapping their shoulder if you're in the office with them. And when you take that away, you have to learn to work in different ways. And that means documenting your information, documenting why you're doing something. The best example would be, right, I'm sitting here in Copenhagen. I need to get an answer from someone. I know that they're not going to answer me right until I've already left. So I need to provide them all of the information so then I get the response that I want, right? The worst is when you send someone an email, hope to get the response back, but let's say your email isn't strong enough or it doesn't give them enough information, then now I get a response. It doesn't help me. I've got to wait another day to send a follow-up email and then wait for them to respond again, right? That could take a long time. You could take a whole week just to get one simple question answered. So instead of me just sending off like maybe a 1 or 2 sentence email or Slack, I'm actually going to say, okay, here's the problem that I'm solving. Here is the objective. This is my question for you. And here are links to additional information. So then the person that you're sending the message to can actually go in and dig deeper if they need to. So in essence, you're anticipating additional questions, trying to provide them all of the information. So then you get a useful answer that you can use the next day. So it's really about being more efficient when you're communicating across time zones.
Gotcha. And hence why the documentation as opposed to sort of back and forth, so that you can kind of get to meaningful, productive results sooner,
Yeah.
as opposed to never.
Yeah, and one of the great so Basecamp is one of the companies that I really like that started this. They have a great guide to internal communication, and I loved their quote, sort of to paraphrase, is like, you're creating documentation not only for employees now, but for any future employee. So this idea that you could hire someone tomorrow and they could come in and they could read through your documentation and understand what is going on and have the context and be able to start working. So I really like that. So creating even like meeting minute notes. Think about future employees, right? You're going to hire someone in 2 months. Could they come and look at your rolling agenda and understand what has gone on and get information from that? So it's not losing information that usually when you're having real-time communication, it can fall away or a lot of information is just lost, especially if someone doesn't write it down or they're not taking notes. And so asynchronous communication helps to preserve that, which then helps when you adopt technology, particularly when you're adopting AI.
Okay, let's talk about it. How does it help? And then how does it help specifically for in-house legal teams? It's a significant investment to document. As somebody who is, often a secretary of the board or, a meticulous note taker, I have notes that are prehistoric, let's just call it that. I have a lot of records and it just helps me to keep memories alive and I remember what I said and who promised me what and hold people responsible for that. Super useful, but it is an investment. It's actually takes a lot of time to document, especially if you do this whole multimedia artistry that you're suggesting that you are deliberately documenting steps, your video, a audio, picture, screenshot. I mean, cool, except it takes a long time. How does it help, not just with human communication? Great. How does it help in this age of AI?
Yeah, that's a great question. It doesn't, just to clarify, it doesn't necessarily have to be multimedia. I try to make sure that I'm inclusive. Not everyone is great at writing. Not everyone has English as their first language. So if they're not comfortable writing, I encourage people, right, to make videos or presentations or draw, Miro, Canva, whatever you need to help communicate. But if we're talking particularly for LLMs, right, you can't upload videos, but you can upload PDFs, drawings, pictures, and things like that. They don't do as well as with the written word. But if you have documentation, you can then it's much easier to leverage AI, right? You can give AI all of the information. So in general, when you're using generative AI, if you put in a general request, like create an NDA for me, you're going to get a very, very general NDA. The LLM is going to, input what it thinks. So it's very different if you say generate an NDA versus generate an NDA, and then let's say you have what is important to you. What's your NDA checklist? Right? What is important for your company to have in there? Let's just say mutual jurisdiction California, no liquidated damages. Just giving the LLM that information that your company has, you're actually going to get a better result because you're putting in specific information that is unique to your company, and you're going to get out a result that then is specific and more unique to your company. So just at a very basic level, it's going to help you when you're doing very simple tasks. And then as you get to more complex tasks, your processes have to be outlined, and your processes are also contextualized so you understand why you're doing something. And that is extremely helpful when you're adopting more complex AI, especially if you're automating or you're trying to use AI agents. The more information and context you have, the better the results that you're going to get.
And of course, when you are inputting information, data, highly documented stuff in AI, you're gonna take care of not putting proprietary, confidential, PII, or just private information generally, both because you don't want to jeopardize your company, your license, and frankly, you don't want to be known for as a person who does that. That's not a good thing to be known for. So that's a separate issue. I don't want to focus on that. I do want to make sure that folks are aware because, we just advocated for meticulous documentation. The last thing we recommend that go ahead, take all that media rich content and put it in chat gpt. I don't think that's what you're quite saying, but I think what you're saying is that that's valuable data to extent you want to have more contextual, more specific, better output. Data is your friend, and FYI, you're creating data in every communication. Your ability to harvest it or document it, which is the term you use, can be super helpful for all kinds of things from training employees to training AI. I think that's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, to be clear, when I work with teams, I always follow their guidelines, right? I've worked with some amazing legal teams who, oh my gosh, I think last year had their own in-house GPT, right? So they could put all of their documentation into that. However, if you're using the free version of Copilot or ChatGPT, please don't put your company documentation into it or personally identifiable information. So it really depends on what model you're using and what your legal and compliance teams have decided is okay for what information you can put into those systems that you're using.
So how can you get started? How can you get started in a way that is doesn't feel like you're about to sort of do an open kimono to the rest of the world?
Well, a great way is, first download whether you are a Microsoft, house, not download, but go to and use the free version of Copilot or the free version of ChatGPT. I believe Claude, you can also use their free version and just start playing with it. And I always start with NDAs, right? Those are usually sort of the simple, most basic contracts that are usually automated first if you're undertaking an automation project. So play around and just ask it, hey, please create me an NDA, maybe give it some more specific information. It's also fun to play with tone. I like to say, like, if you wanted to write that really angry email response because you're frustrated, write it into one of these chats and then ask it to rephrase it in a very polite yet professional manner, and you can let your frustrations out and then get a nice communication in return that's professional and doesn't upset the other person. Also, with ChatGPT, then you can also ask it to create drawings. So I think the first step is really just to start playing around with it to get a feel of what works and what doesn't work for you when you're using instructions, and it's really helpful that way to see how it actually operates.
Yeah, I feel like I've become a better human through my communications with ChatGPT. I basically know that the answer is no, and if I said it to a person, they would be upset. But then I ask it to write it better, and they actually gladly agree. and ChatGPT in the process made me a better person and a better communicator because I finally sort of understood some things that were completely missed in translation. So what is the next step? So now you kind of understand the extent of this tool. You understand that it can kind of make you sound more professional, say no in a more pleasant way that makes people nod and say yes. What's that? What do you do then?
Well, I think you really need to understand two really key limitations when you're using this, or I guess probably three. Sometimes I forget that people aren't using this all the time. So the first one I would say is that, right, this is I don't want to oversimplify it, but it basically predicts text or the next letter. So there really is no truth. This is not Google. It has information and it has access. If you're using a model that has access to online, it can access online information. However, it wants to answer your questions and create a response for you. And it's generative because it creates new content. So unlike Google, it's not going out and finding websites based on your question. It's creating new information and it's using what you've given it. It's using what it's trained on, which no one has given us a complete answer about what exactly all of that information is. And then it can also use websites. And so when that happens, that enables hallucinations, which I'm sure we've all heard about, and also bias. So your responses you can have hallucinations and you also have bias built in. So I recommend that you always validate your responses. Please don't just copy and paste from the output of ChatGPT or Copilot, into a client email or into a court brief and send it off, right? We've seen many examples of that where lawyers have gotten in trouble for doing that. So you must always validate the output because it's liable to hallucinations. And then because it's trained on material that was created by humans and we have bias is built in. And being here in Europe, I say, that even these models are primarily trained on English and American legal systems. So they're biased towards American English, they're biased towards American contracts and towards the American legal system. So those are things that you need to think about when you're using the output. So understanding the limitations is really important. You can use it as initial research for something that you don't know a lot about, but I think it's best if you use it in areas where you have a lot of expertise and knowledge and use it to help you become more efficient and effective.
Okay, I'm about to insert some drama in this conversation because somehow this is controversial about prompt engineering. There's this wild debate. Is it here for now? Is this here forever? Is this here somewhere in the middle, meaning for some time but not forever? Or will stay in some form like a Boolean search? It's helpful to know how it works, but you won't have to actually dissect and understand it. It's not an art form that is forever. I don't think anything is forever, so I guess to some extent I side with that first camp. I nonetheless think it's an extraordinary useful thing. I'm not sure to what extent and how long. So, and I'm not going to ask you to resolve this debate because I actually don't necessarily think it's useful at this point in time. But I will ask you about your best tips. Today when you are taking whatever data in whatever safe context and you understand the extent of this tool, you absolutely, it's helpful to have understanding of prompt engineering. You get absolutely better results today. I think that is not a controversial statement. So with that in mind, what are your best practices?
Well, what I like to say in the very beginning, right, is understand, what is your objective and provide context. The more information that you give it without releasing, confidential or PII information, the better your results will be. And that takes some practice. I've also come up with a strategy that I call RAPS. I tried to first make a strategy after IRAC for the American Law School Issue Rule Application Conclusion, but since I'm in Europe, I've changed it. So my strategy is RAPS, and I'll tell you what that is really quickly. It is RAPS starts with a W. So W is what? So what is it that you want the LLM to output, right? Do you want an email? Do you want a contract? Do you want a PowerPoint presentation? Do you want it to do a math problem, which it's not great at? So what is the expected output? After that is an R. So what's your role? And in that, I actually like to say, I am in-house counsel for a SaaS company. I have also tried, act like you're a lawyer for a SaaS company. And I found that I get better results if I tell it, this is my role. So the what, the role, and then A is the audience. So who is your target audience? Is it someone that you're negotiating with, the counterparty? Is it your boss? Is it the CEO? Is it a group, your sales team that you're educating about your MSA? So you've got the what, the role, the audience, and then the purpose. And that's a little bit different than the what. The purpose is, what is your overarching purpose? What are you hoping to achieve with this, right? Do you want to persuade the other side to agree with you? Do you want to try to influence your boss? Do you want to try to educate people? So then you give it a little bit of context about the purpose. So we've got the what, the role, the audience, and the purpose. And the last part of wraps is the scope. And that really is the context. And that can actually be the bulk of the prompt. So that is any additional information that you can provide that will help get you a better and more specific result. So it's wraps, what, role, audience, purpose, and scope. And when you're using that framework, it really helps you to start to build out a prompt that is much more specific and tailored to what you want versus than just, asking, can you create this for me?
And are you like trying to get it all on one try, or are you like doing it in increments?
So that the prompting strategy is wraps, and then wraps come with dip. And this is from my friend Alex at Legal Techno. And so he came up with dip. And so that's how you interact with it. So D and dip sounds for discussion. Have a discussion. Please have a conversation with it, right? These are chats. It's not one and done. If you don't like your answer, tell it that you don't like your answer. Tell it that it needs to be more specific. Tell it, that you want it to do something else. So have a discussion with it. And then also interrogate it, right? Feel free to ask it where it got that information. Really, get in there like you would with a lawyer. Use your lawyerly skills to get the information that you need. And then the last of the dip is pace. So pace yourself. It takes patience and to do this and to learn what works for you. And sometimes you get terrible results. And then that's when I just close the window and start again, right? Like, this is not going down a good path. I'm going to start over. So sometimes I will try to put everything in a prompt, but even from OpenAI's prompt engineering guide, it's not great with complex tasks.
Oh
So
yeah, it really is not good. It's actually kind of like my teenagers. If I give them five
it's
pieces of information, they may remember any of it. But if I give it kind of one at a time, patiently with a smile, and kind of keep reinforcing, it's just so much better at it. And so if I find it, if I give it a little and then it gets it right, I say, "Oh, good. Let's now add that." So that kind of hey, you on the right track, keep going, and let's add one more layer. It seems to be working so much better. When I give it like a bunch of stuff, it sort of selects some stuff at random and combines in a way that I've never seen before. And it's just really wild. It just doesn't work very well at all for me.
And that's actually called there's in like, I think, needle in the haystack phenomenon, where they were trying to do this and they found that it's really great at the beginning. So if you give it, let's say, a long contract, it's good at like the first couple pages or maybe first page. It gets super confused in the middle, and then it does pretty good with the end. So
It has a recency bias for sure, and at the middle, it doesn't believe in the middle.
yeah.
It very much sort of gets the first few words and then gets the last few words, and then it says voila, and it's the middle is completely lost. It just like middle doesn't even exist, and you see Lawrence here who really likes your acronyms rap and deep. I like them too. They're pretty special. Thank you for that. But yeah, the middle is it doesn't exist in ChatGPT. Just kind of yeah.
You can also use ChatGPT, right? You can say, one of my favorite prompts is, tell me what you need to do this. So I'll give it an objective, give it some context, and say, tell me what other information you need to do this. And then it'll tell you that. And you can also ask it, hey, I want to achieve this? What are the steps that I need to take to achieve this? So you can have it set out the steps and then ask it to follow the steps. And that is more successful than trying to get it to do something at once, right? So you can either give it the steps yourself one by one, or you can have it help you create the steps and then implement the steps. So those are, two different ways that you can kind of chunk things into smaller bits to help it along so it doesn't get lost in the middle.
I love your strategy for shutting it down. I think it's so true. At some point, it reaches the point of no return. And no additional information or instructions will help it. It is basically lost in its black hole. And I agree with you. And it's one of those things where I now talk to my teenagers. I'm like, I wish I could just restart you.
New chat.
Can we do that again? Because you just mumbo jumbled everything I said.
Yes, that's true. There some ways it is sort of like a teenager. And also to that extent, I keep seeing reinforcements of the idea of treating it like a human and saying please and thank you and treating it politely, and you actually get better results. There's been studies, and also anecdotally people have said that. So I still, in the beginning, I felt like I needed to say please and referring to you and things like that. And I keep doing that. And it seems to be working. And other people, research has also supports that. So that's interesting of
I
treating
mean,
it.
even if it is psychosomatic, I actually think most of it is I mean, it's a machine. I don't really think
Yes.
it 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 really appreciate. I don't think it really appreciates
Well,
nice.
it doesn't
But I
appreciate
do
it.
think it does mirroring, and receiving something not nice on this side is just not what we as humans designed to enjoy. So I think it's just a better experience when you do that, and so I think it makes you more patient with it, you give better prompts, and therefore you get better results. But I think it's that mirroring of the human and machine that is happening. I don't think it really actually cares.
No,
You
no,
tell me if you see it in a different way.
no, there's no feeling, there's no caring, but it's interesting. Like, what is the information that it was trained on? And there must be something, even though if it was trained on the internet, and the internet can be a pretty dark and terrible place. I think there's more positive, I guess, kind or nice material that it's trained on. Because if you're, sort of kind or nice or phrase things in a way where you're asking for help, it's more, I'm guessing that, right, the mechanics of it give you a better result, or at least that's what I've been reading, right? There's obviously no feelings, but it's something in the way that it was created, in the material that it's trained on, and the predictive text. It's like, oh, I need to give a better response for some reason. I don't know, right, what's going. I'm not a data scientist or specialize in that part of it, although I'd love to. I don't know exactly what's going on, but there's some interesting phenomenons that they're finding, right, as we're using these tools more and more.
We are coming to the end much sooner than I hoped.
Yeah.
We clearly can talk about it for a long time. I do want to talk about maybe one question to ask you around
Yeah.
what have you seen, practically speaking, the effect on legal teams, especially in-house legal teams, on their sort of day-to-day? Where do you think the most productive use cases, especially when they're done, say, for the in-house legal teams?
Yeah, so for in-house legal teams, right, it's a little bit different, the use cases, than law firms. For me, being in-house counsel, if I can save, let's just say 10 minutes a day, that adds up over the whole year and gives me a lot of time back. So, a lot of times I'll just sort of like brain dump into ChatGPT, and it'll structure and give me a great response. Or, you're doing a contract negotiation sort of late in the afternoon, something comes in and you're like, no, ugh, I can't accept that. And you don't have a playbook because you work in a startup. So you have to come up with your own responses, right? Anytime we have to create new material, it's going to take time for us to think through it and to like really get exactly what we want communicated across in the right way. And it takes time and effort. For me, I have to write something and then I have to edit it. And then come back to it maybe to make sure that if it's very sensitive, I'm communicating in the way that I want to. And with ChatGPT and Copilot, they can help me do what was maybe, let's just say, like 15 minutes or a half an hour in like 5 minutes. Or if you're writing policies, right, creating internal documentation, you can just put in exactly what you need from a legal perspective and say, now, can you write this, for this audience? Or at our company, we use ChatGPT, and I created a tone of voice GPT. So then we could put materials into it, and then it will transform it and put it into the company's tone of voice and brand. So there's just a lot of time savers when you're creating anything that involves text. Also, right, creating images, it can create presentations, really helps also with if you're using Excel or Google Sheets, creating spreadsheets, doing formulas, you can get it to write those for you. So there's just a lot of time savers with the very basic tools. And then obviously, as you get more advanced, there's much more that you can do.
Yeah, I personally love it to us to critique my work, and it does it so diplomatically that it and so lovely that I'm like, oh, it's a learning opportunity. This is great. I am becoming a better version of Olga. So I really thoroughly enjoyed that. I think the other thing I enjoy asking it to find an intersection of two unusual things that don't usually go together, sort of a fusion cuisine. And it actually a really great way. And it's not surprising. I'm an artist. That's a lot of creativity is on the fusion of two worlds that don't usually intersect. And ChatGPT allows to test that much quicker and sort of see what creative ideas are out there that are not anywhere else in the universe. I really love that. It doesn't necessarily save me time. It probably actually sends me to the black rabbit hole for searching for gems. But I really enjoy that gem hunting. It's so much fun. Tells you a lot about me. Maybe last question. You talked a lot about asynchronous communication. You talked a lot about sort of how that's helpful with AI. We talked a lot about kind of prompt engineering techniques and how to have fun with this tool safely. If I am a leader of for in-house professionals, some of them are lawyers, some of them may not be lawyers, they may be other professionals, they may be reporting to lawyers, they may need instructions from lawyers. What are the skills I need to make sure that my team has so that they're safe and free to be more productive, to be more creative, to be more impactful, to really sort of practice on top of their license?
That's a great question. So, with teaching teams how to use AI tools, right? It's a different approach than it is to traditional legal practice and coming from law firms, right? Where we need everything to be 100% accurate and everything needs to be 100% perfect. Right now, we're still trying to figure out use cases for generative AI. And so that requires, an innovative mindset, a sort of research and development mindset where you're going to fail. And that's okay because you can learn from that. And part of, trying something out and innovating and figuring out new use cases, failure is going to be an outcome. And so we have to embrace failure and encourage that and encourage professionals, give them the time to learn and explore, right? This is a new tool. We need to learn how to use it. It's going to be incorporated in probably most products. It might become, like you're saying, sort of, with search, where we don't exactly know where it's going, but we need to understand how it works and try to figure out how we can leverage that. And so that requires the time, space, and psychological safety to try and to fail. And then that's where you're going to need some of those skill sets. And with that, you also need creativity, right? So giving your team the space to experiment, to do trial and error, and to be creative. And in order for that to be successful, right, they need to feel that they really are given permission to do that and given space to do that. And it's not kind of like, oh, just do this on top of your normal job. So carving out time to use AI and figure out whether that's through training or through practices, I think that is really essential. And that's very different to how legal teams are used to operating. So it's really sort of shifting. So we've got, also creativity and communication are going to be, I think, really important for legal professionals moving forward as we're leveraging these new technologies.
Oh, haven't they always been? The difference between me uttering advice and it's evaporating and you actually taking it is usually in delivery. Laura, thank you so much for co-authoring and chapter in this book. I thoroughly enjoyed our collaboration there. And thank you so much for joining me. Now for a second conversation, I will post the first conversation in the chat for people to enjoy as well. As you know, you and I can talk all day. I love your tips. I like the reps and the dips and all the examples. Very, very helpful. We covered a lot of ground. What is one takeaway you want folks to take from this conversation?
Well, I think the first main takeaway, right, is try. Like just try and play and have fun and experiment with these technologies. And then, if you're at a loss, I've really found in working with teams that RAPs and DIP are a great way to start to structure prompts if you don't know where to begin, right? So again, RAPs, we're talking about what the expected output, what's your role, who's the audience, what's the purpose, and what's the scope? What are the additional details that you need? And then to have a discussion and interrogate the responses that you get. And I think that's a great way to get started, because I think sometimes people will sit down and want to get started but have no idea where to start. So that's why we've created this very simple RAP structure that you can sort of frame your question to get started and enable you to start playing and then continuing the conversation with whatever chat bot that you're using.
I love it. Thank you so much for this amazing conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Hopefully, we'll do it again. I mean, why not? We've done it twice. We can do it thrice. I mean,
Yeah.
that sounds like a great idea. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and
Thank you,
thank you for having
audience,
me.
for joining, and thank you so much for being active and asking questions. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.
Bye.
And that brings us to the end of another thrilling episode on the Notes to My Legal Self AI Insights. We had a fantastic time exploring the fascinating intersection of law and AI with you. But hold on tight, because the adventure doesn't stop here. Stay connected with us on social media to continue the conversation, share your thoughts, and be part of our incredible community of legal enthusiasts. Together, we can inspire, learn, and make a real impact on the world of law and AI. If you enjoyed today's episode, we encourage you to share it with your friends, colleagues, and anyone else who could benefit from the exciting insights we discussed. Let's spread the knowledge and enthusiasm far and wide.